General Motors just dropped a bombshell that has Donald Trump fuming, and it's sending shockwaves through the auto industry and beyond. The decision has defied Trump's America First agenda, sending shockwaves through the auto industry and political world alike. But why did GM take such a massive risk? What has Trump done in response that's turning heads? And most importantly, how will this battle impact American jobs, car prices, and the future of the U.S. economy? Stick around, because this isn't just about cars. It's about power, politics, and the future of American industry. Let's break it down. What's happening? General Motors has long been synonymous with American manufacturing, a pillar of industrial strength that helped shape the nation's economy. The company's factories produced vehicles that became part of American culture, from the Chevrolet Corvette to the Cadillac Escalade. However, recent decisions made by General Motors have challenged its legacy and sparked a political and economic firestorm. In an era of globalization and technological shifts, General Motors made a series of choices that alienated its traditional supporters. The company expanded operations overseas, embraced a controversial transition to electric vehicles, and adjusted its supply chain to include more foreign partnerships. While these moves may have made sense from a business standpoint, they clashed with the America First movement, which champions keeping jobs and industries within U.S. borders. No one seized on this controversy more than Donald Trump, who quickly made General Motors a political target. He positioned the automaker as a symbol of corporate betrayal, claiming that its decisions reflected a willingness to prioritize profits over American workers. Trump accused General Motors of turning its back on the very country that made it successful, rallying his supporters to take a stand against what he saw as another example of globalism undermining the U.S. economy. This conflict between General Motors and Donald Trump quickly escalated beyond a simple business decision. It became a cultural and political war over the future of American industry. At the heart of the issue was a fundamental question. Should American companies remain loyal to U.S. manufacturing, even at the cost of higher expenses? Or should they prioritize global competitiveness, even if it means moving jobs overseas? But what exactly did General Motors do to trigger this showdown? The move that changed everything. The turning point in this conflict came when General Motors announced its plans to expand production outside of the United States. The company revealed that it would ramp up manufacturing in Mexico and China, shifting production away from several U.S. plants. For many, this announcement was seen as an economic betrayal, especially for the thousands of American workers whose jobs were now at risk. General Motors, however, defended its decision, arguing that global production was necessary to remain competitive. Company executives explained that manufacturing costs in the United States had risen dramatically, making it difficult to compete with foreign automakers. By producing cars and components in lower-cost regions, General Motors claimed it could keep prices affordable for American consumers while maintaining profitability. But Trump and his supporters saw things differently. They viewed this move as a direct insult to American workers, an abandonment of U.S. manufacturing at a time when companies should be reinvesting in domestic production. The president, who had built much of his political identity around protecting American jobs, immediately went on the offensive. Trump called out General Motors publicly, criticizing the company for outsourcing jobs while continuing to benefit from American consumers. He argued that taxpayer dollars should not support a company that was sending manufacturing jobs overseas. His attacks gained traction among blue-collar workers, factory unions, and conservative media, who painted General Motors as a company that had turned its back on its American roots. The backlash was swift. Across the country, protests erupted outside General Motors factories and dealerships. Some unions, which had previously been supporters of the company, expressed outrage over the decision to move production abroad. General Motors suddenly found itself at the center of one of the most heated economic and political debates in modern history. But things escalated even further when General Motors doubled down on a controversial future: electric vehicles. The EV war. While outsourcing and foreign production had already put General Motors in hot water, the company's next big announcement added even more fuel to the fire. General Motors committed to phasing out gas-powered vehicles by the year 2035 and investing billions of dollars into electric vehicle production. On paper, this move made sense. The global automotive market was shifting, and EV adoption was rising across Europe, China, and parts of the United States. General Motors saw an opportunity to become a leader in the electric revolution, following in the footsteps of Tesla, which had dominated the EV space. However, the real controversy stemmed from where General Motors was sourcing the materials for its electric vehicles. Many of the critical minerals needed for EV batteries, such as lithium, cobalt, and nickel, were primarily sourced and processed outside the United States, particularly in China. This meant that despite General Motors' claims that its transition to EVs was good for American manufacturing, the reality was that the company was now even more dependent on foreign supply chains. Trump and his supporters seized on this point, accusing General Motors of selling out America in favor of globalist policies and climate change initiatives. They argued that the push for EVs was being driven by government mandates and international climate agreements, rather than consumer demand. This clash over electric vehicles quickly became one of the defining battles between General Motors and Trump. On one side, General Motors positioned itself as a forward-thinking company, adapting to new technology and consumer trends. On the other side, Trump and his base viewed the EV shift as an attempt to destroy American jobs, benefit China, and push a political agenda. But while Trump waged war on General Motors, the company had a powerful defense strategy. GM fights back. Despite public backlash and political pressure, General Motors refused to back down. Instead, the company doubled down on its vision for the future, arguing that its decisions were not just about politics, but about long-term survival in an evolving market. CEO Mary Barra took the lead in defending General Motors' strategy. She emphasized that the company was not abandoning American manufacturing, but was investing billions of dollars into US-based battery plants. These plants, located in Michigan, Tennessee, and Ohio, were designed to boost EV production while keeping American jobs intact. Barra also made it clear that General Motors was focused on leading the global transition to electric vehicles, positioning itself as an innovator rather than a follower. The company was investing in next-generation battery technology, charging infrastructure, hoping to compete directly with Tesla and Chinese EV manufacturers. Meanwhile, investors remained confident in General Motors' strategy. Despite the controversy, Wall Street analysts saw long-term potential in the company's EV plans, believing that General Motors was making the right move for future profitability. The stock price remained relatively stable, indicating that many in the financial world supported the company's direction. However, Trump was not finished yet. Seeing that his public criticism alone was not enough to force General Motors to change course, he prepared his next move, one that would have a direct impact on the automotive industry and global trade. But Trump was just getting started. He had a plan to strike back in a way that would shake the industry. Tariffs, boycotts, and backlash. The battle between General Motors and Donald Trump escalated rapidly as the president launched a full-scale economic and political war against the automaker. From campaign rallies to media appearances, Trump aggressively attacked GM's decision to move production overseas and embrace an electric future. He framed GM's global expansion as a betrayal of American workers, urging his supporters to take a stand. One of Trump's primary weapons was tariffs. He proposed imposing massive import taxes on GM vehicles and parts manufactured outside the United States, particularly those coming from Mexico and China. Trump argued that punishing automakers financially was the only way to force them to keep production on U.S. soil. His proposed tariffs could reach as high as 25%, drastically increasing costs for GM and putting the company's pricing structure at risk. In addition to tariffs, Trump called for a nationwide boycott of GM vehicles. He used his social media presence and rallies to rally conservative consumers against the company, claiming that GM had abandoned the very workers who built its reputation. This strategy resonated with many Americans who felt left behind by globalization, particularly in manufacturing-heavy states like Michigan and Ohio. Trump's rhetoric gained traction in conservative media outlets, where hosts echoed his calls for a boycott and questioned GM's commitment to the United States. The backlash extended beyond politics. Labor unions, already frustrated with GM's approach to wages and benefits, found themselves aligned with Trump's criticisms. Many auto workers, despite historically supporting Democratic candidates, expressed frustration that GM was outsourcing jobs while securing billions in government incentives. The pressure on GM was mounting, with potential tariffs looming, an active boycott campaign, and growing resistance from American workers. The company faced its biggest public relations crisis in years. But as the battle intensified, it revealed a much larger issue. GM wasn't the only automaker struggling to survive in this evolving market. But GM wasn't the only automaker facing a crisis. This battle was exposing deeper problems in the entire U.S. auto industry. The hidden crisis. While Trump's attack on GM made headlines, the deeper issue was that American automakers as a whole were struggling to adapt to a rapidly changing industry. Rising production costs, stricter government regulations, and intense global competition had left legacy automakers like Ford, GM, and Stellantis fighting for survival. One of the biggest challenges was the cost of producing electric vehicles. GM's decision to shift toward an all-electric future was a bold move, but EV production comes with massive financial and logistical hurdles. Unlike gas-powered vehicles, EVs require specialized batteries, complex software, and charging infrastructure that is still being developed. The materials needed to produce EV batteries, lithium, cobalt, and nickel, are largely controlled by foreign suppliers, particularly in China. This means that even as GM tries to position itself as a leader in EV technology, it is still dependent on global supply chains, making it vulnerable to price fluctuations, trade wars, and geopolitical tensions. Meanwhile, foreign automakers were gaining ground in the US market. Tesla, once a niche brand, had become the dominant force in the EV industry, outselling GM's electric models by a wide margin. At the same time, Chinese EV companies like BYD and NIO were rapidly expanding, offering lower-cost electric vehicles that threatened to undercut traditional American brands. Compounding these issues were increasing government regulations. The push for stricter fuel efficiency standards and carbon emission targets forced automakers to redesign their vehicle lineups at enormous costs. While companies like GM publicly supported these initiatives, the reality was that meeting these standards required billions in investment, with no guarantee of profitability. For traditional American automakers, the stakes had never been higher. The industry was being forced to transform faster than ever before, and companies that failed to adapt risked becoming obsolete. But this wasn't the first time the US auto industry had been on the brink of collapse. But to understand where this is heading, we need to look at history. This isn't the first time the auto industry has faced collapse. Because now it's not just about survival, it's about the future of American industry itself. Is American manufacturing dying? The bigger picture. For decades, the United States was the global leader in manufacturing. Detroit, once known as the Motor City, was the heart of American industry, producing millions of vehicles each year. But over the past 40 years, the U.S. has lost millions of manufacturing jobs as companies outsourced production to countries with cheaper labor costs. This shift wasn't unique to the auto industry. Textiles, electronics, and steel production all followed the same pattern. Globalization allowed companies to cut costs and increase profits, but it also left entire industries hollowed out. Donald Trump's America First agenda aimed to reverse this trend by bringing manufacturing jobs back to the United States. His administration imposed tariffs on foreign imports, renegotiated trade deals, and pushed for domestic production. However, despite these efforts, the forces driving globalization remained strong. But for now, the battle between Trump and GM is a symbol of a much larger issue. It's not just about one company or one industry. It's about the future of America's economic power. And while GM and Trump battle, other companies are quietly finding ways to win in this changing landscape. The brands that are beating the crash and how they're doing it. While General Motors is caught in a whirlwind of political controversy, rising costs, and a rapidly changing market, some automakers are proving that adaptability and strategy can still lead to success. A few brands have managed to sidestep the crisis by balancing affordability, innovation, and consumer trust. Three critical factors that are determining the winners and losers in the current auto industry shakeup. Honda and Toyota are two companies that continue to dominate the global auto market, and their approach has been relatively simple: meet consumer demands without radical disruption. Unlike General Motors, which is aggressively shifting toward electric vehicles despite logistical challenges, these Japanese automakers have taken a slower, more calculated approach to EVs, focusing instead on hybrid technology, affordability, and long-term reliability. Their hybrid models, like the Toyota Prius and Honda Accord Hybrid, provide an accessible middle ground for consumers who want fuel efficiency but aren't ready to fully commit to electric. Another key factor in their success is affordability. While General Motors has struggled with rising production costs and pricing concerns, Toyota and Honda have maintained cost-effective manufacturing strategies, keeping their vehicles within reach for middle-class buyers. By producing cars in countries with strong but lower-cost labor markets and utilizing existing hybrid technology, they've kept their vehicles at a price point that still appeals to buyers, especially in a time of economic uncertainty. On the other side of the spectrum, Tesla has thrived by doing the exact opposite. Unlike Honda and Toyota, Tesla went all in on electric vehicles early, but it did so with a business model that avoids many of the pitfalls General Motors is facing. Tesla's direct-to-consumer sales strategy allows it to bypass traditional dealerships, giving the company full control over pricing, inventory, and the customer experience. Instead of relying on middlemen, Tesla keeps its profit margins strong by selling vehicles online and in company-owned showrooms, eliminating dealership markups. Additionally, Tesla has turned vehicle software into a continuous revenue stream. Unlike most automakers, who sell a car once and rely on parts and service for future profits, Tesla's vehicles receive over-the-air software updates that unlock new features, improve performance, and even change the way the car drives. Some of these updates are available through paid subscriptions, generating consistent revenue long after the initial sale. While some automakers are struggling to stay relevant, others have shown that success in today's industry requires either careful financial management and consumer trust or bold innovation and business model control. But despite Tesla's dominance in electric vehicles, one country is taking over the market at a speed no one expected, and it's not America. The rise of China. The biggest power shift in the global auto industry isn't coming from Tesla or any traditional automaker. It's happening in China. While American brands like General Motors and Ford struggle to transition into electric vehicles, Chinese automakers like BYD, NIO, and XPeng are expanding at an unprecedented rate, rapidly outpacing legacy automakers in innovation, affordability, and production capacity. A key reason for this dominance is government backing. The Chinese government has heavily subsidized the electric vehicle industry, funding research, production, and infrastructure at a scale the United States and Europe have not matched. This has allowed companies like BYD to develop high-quality electric vehicles at lower costs, making them more appealing to both Chinese consumers and global markets. Another advantage China holds is battery production. Over 80% of the world's lithium-ion battery supply chain is controlled by China, giving its automakers a massive competitive edge. While General Motors and Ford still rely on imports for their EV batteries, Chinese automakers have direct access to the world's most critical EV component, allowing them to produce electric cars faster. General Motors, ironically, is deeply invested in the Chinese market, relying on partnerships with local companies to maintain its global presence. However, this puts GM in a difficult position. China is both a crucial business partner and one of its biggest long-term threats. As Chinese automakers expand, they will eventually compete with General Motors on a global scale, challenging GM's dominance not just in China, but in the US and European markets as well. Meanwhile, Chinese companies are setting the standard for electric vehicle technology. NIO, for example, has pioneered battery swapping stations, allowing EV drivers to replace their depleted battery packs in minutes instead of waiting for a recharge. BYD has mastered affordable EV manufacturing, producing cars at lower prices than even Tesla can achieve. These innovations are pushing the entire industry forward, but at the same time, they're making it harder for American automakers to compete. But while China's rise presents a massive challenge, there's another major disruptor shaking the auto industry: technology itself. AI, automation, and self-driving cars. The future of transportation is about more than just gas versus electric. The rise of artificial intelligence, automation, and self-driving cars is reshaping the way we think about personal vehicles, and companies like Tesla, Waymo, and Rivian are leading the charge. Self-driving technology is advancing at a rapid pace, with Tesla's autopilot and full self-driving software already offering limited hands-free driving capabilities. Google-owned Waymo is testing fully autonomous taxis in major cities, aiming to replace traditional ride-hailing services like Uber and Lyft. Rivian and other startups are exploring autonomous commercial fleets, which could reduce the need for human drivers in trucking and delivery industries. Some experts predict that private car ownership itself will decline in favor of on-demand, automated transportation. Instead of buying a personal vehicle, future consumers may subscribe to autonomous ride-sharing services, paying a monthly fee for access to self-driving cars whenever they need them. This shift could disrupt General Motors, Ford, and other traditional automakers, forcing them to pivot from selling cars to selling mobility as a service. However, the technology isn't perfect yet. Self-driving cars still struggle with complex urban environments, unpredictable human drivers, and bad weather conditions. Legal and regulatory hurdles also remain. Many governments still require a human driver to be present in autonomous vehicles. Despite these challenges, the push for automation is already changing the industry, and automakers that fail to adapt could find themselves falling behind. But as self-driving technology reshapes the market, it raises a bigger question. Do younger generations even want to own cars anymore? The next generation. Several factors are driving this trend. Car prices have skyrocketed, making it harder for younger buyers to afford a new vehicle. Insurance costs, student loan debt, and rising rent prices have also pushed car ownership lower on their priority list. At the same time, urbanization is reducing the need for cars. Many young people live in cities where public transportation is more convenient than driving. Ride-sharing apps like Uber and Lyft provide easy access to transportation without the hassle of parking, gas, and maintenance. General Motors is betting on a future where fewer people own personal vehicles, shifting toward subscription-based EV access and self-driving mobility services. But will this bet pay off, or will younger buyers eventually return to car ownership as they grow older and move to the suburbs? Transition. So if the market is changing this fast, what should today's car buyers do? In the next section, we'll break down the smartest moves in this evolving landscape. Should you buy, sell, or wait? The smartest moves right now. The car market is in a state of uncertainty, making it difficult for consumers to decide whether to buy, sell, or wait. On one hand, new car prices remain historically high, largely due to supply chain disruptions and GM's shift towards electric vehicles. On the other hand, used car prices, which skyrocketed during the pandemic, have finally started to fall. This decline creates opportunities for buyers, but it also raises concerns for those looking to sell their current vehicles. For buyers, the biggest factor to consider is whether prices will continue to drop or rebound. The rise of electric vehicles is reshaping the market, with automakers like GM investing billions in electrification. However, challenges in EV production, including battery shortages and reliance on foreign suppliers, could lead to higher prices for electric cars in the short term. Meanwhile, manufacturers are still struggling with chip shortages and rising production costs, which means gas-powered cars may remain expensive for now. For sellers, timing is everything. The used car market is softening, meaning vehicles that once sold for inflated prices are now seeing reduced demand. If you own a gas-powered vehicle, its resale value may soon depend on future regulations and fuel prices. If government incentives push more people toward EVs and gasoline becomes more expensive, traditional cars may lose value faster than expected. Financing is another critical aspect. Interest rates on car loans have increased significantly, making monthly payments much higher than they were just a few years ago. Higher interest rates mean that even if car prices drop, the total cost of ownership could remain high. This puts buyers in a tough spot. Should they lock in a deal now or wait for prices and rates to stabilize? If you are in the market for a car, patience may be key. Prices for used vehicles are expected to continue dropping, and new car inventory is starting to improve, which could lead to better deals in the near future. However, if you need a car urgently, consider looking for models with strong resale value or shopping for incentives offered by dealerships trying to clear excess inventory. And finally, who really wins in the end? Trump, GM, or someone else? Who comes out on top? As the battle between GM and Trump unfolds, the question remains, who will emerge as the true winner? Trump's America. First Movement has put massive pressure on corporations to prioritize U.S. manufacturing. His push for tariffs and economic nationalism could reshape how American companies approach globalization. If his policies gain traction, GM and other automakers may be forced to bring more jobs back to the U.S. However, economic realities and global supply chains make this a difficult goal to achieve. On the other hand, GM's bet on electric vehicles is a high-risk, high-reward strategy. If successful, it could dominate the EV market and establish itself as the leader of a new era in American manufacturing. However, if battery shortages, competition from China, or consumer hesitancy slow down EV adoption, GM could struggle to justify its massive investments. Ultimately, the real winners may not be GM or Trump, but the consumers who adapt to the changing market. As gas-powered cars decline and EVs become more affordable, buyers who time their purchases strategically family could benefit the most from this transformation. The automotive industry is entering one of its most unpredictable eras. What happens in the next few years will shape not just General Motors, but the future of American transportation and global competitiveness. Should GM have stayed loyal to U.S. manufacturing, or is Trump's attack unfair? Drop a comment below.